Welcome to the Golf Improvement Podcast, episode 46.
Welcome to the podcast for golf lovers and enthusiasts who are looking to take their games to new heights. Dedicated to custom club fitting, short game improvement, and effective practice to improve your golf game. This is the Golf Improvement Podcast with your host, Tony Wright.
Hello, this is Tony Wright from Game Improvement Golf in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, with the Golf Improvement Podcast, dedicated to bringing you useful information on custom club fitting, short game improvement, and effective practice techniques to take your game to new heights in 2016. Well, I had a great week at the PGA Equipment Show last week. I felt like I was able to accomplish, truthfully, more than I've been able to accomplish at any of the previous shows I've attended. I did a Sam Putt Lab putter fitting training. I had some meetings with driver shaft companies. I found a couple really neat little putting improvement tools that I'm going to start using in my own basement, but I also think that can help golfers practice to improve their putting. But so you'll hear a lot more details on some of the things I learned at the PGA Equipment Show if you read my monthly newsletter, which will come out on the 15th of February. The most fun and the most interesting thing I did, at least personally for my own golf game, though, at the show, was I participated, as I called in the last podcast, mystery training. And the mystery training was actually something I did on Thursday, January 28th. I attended a 4-hour fluid motion factor training that was done by Stephen Yellen and Rick McCord at the McCord Golf Academy. The process, this fluid motion factor process that Stephen teaches and that we learned at the training, helps golfers to quiet their minds and to create an environment where they can play the type of golf that they play when they've played their best. I hit some amazing golf shots during the time I was working with Stephen and Rick, and I got a lot to learn about, continue to learn about using this process, but I'm very excited about it. Stephen's going to be doing a future podcast interview with me, and I think you should really look forward to listening to that one. Now we'll go on and have fun listening to this great interview I did with one of my most important mentors, Roy Nix, the founder of the Association of Golf Club Fitting Professionals, talking about what happens in true custom club fitting. Hello, this is Tony Wright with the Golf Improvement Podcast. I'm really delighted today to get to speak with Roy Nix, who is the founder of the Association of Golf Club Fitting Professionals, who has been a top 100, a Golf Digest top 100 club fitter, who has a business, although he's semi-retired, McNix Golf, but he's been a driving force in terms of a lot of people learning how to be great custom club fitters. So Roy, you know, we've had a hard time kind of finding our schedules to match because you're a busy guy, but thanks for doing this.
You're more than welcome, Tony. I wasn't nearly this busy when I was working full time.
Some bosses or something must give you retirement jobs or something, but there you go.
Well, it just seems like all the things I've put off for the last 20 or 25 years because I didn't have time. Now I've got time to catch up, and I'm steady working at it.
There you go. Well, I think it would be fun to start off with you talking about your story. Besides being a great fitter, you were a great player, and I'm not sure I even totally understand what kind of drew you to getting into custom club fitting.
Into custom club fitting?
Yeah, when you first sort of got back into things, and I know from your about page on your website, you went down to the Golfsmith stuff, and what kind of grabbed you about fitting when you really kind of got into it?
Well, it's kind of strange. I had a bad back that ended my great playing, as you describe it.
Yeah.
And after I had started a printing business and operated for about 20 years, and my wife was capable of running it, I was working with my youngest son. He was in high school at the time.
Okay.
And playing golf. And way back in the 70s, I had an off-course golf shop while I was a local pro. I was a head pro at a golf course, and the guy that owned the golf course also had a retail store, and he already had the custom club fitting set up there.
Yeah.
This was in 1973. And to get the job as head pro, I had to know how to build clubs because I had to also manage his golf shop. So my history with custom fitting goes back quite a while. And when my son started playing golf, and I found out that my back was in good enough condition I could actually play golf with him. We went seeking golf clubs, and I decided, well, heck, I wonder if I could find some components somewhere. So I went online, and I don't remember exactly where I ended up then. I think it might have been, maybe Horico.
Mm-hmm.
And I found they had heads, so I ordered some heads and built some test clubs and played with my son a little bit to get him, playing around with the weight, the shaft, the swing weight, grip size, all the things that at that time I knew to do for custom fitting. Because back in the 70s, we didn't have launch monitors.
Oh, yeah.
We didn't have graphite shafts. We didn't have metal heads. Everything was a little bit different. But I put those together, and we were playing one day, and somebody said, "Oh, I like those. Where'd you get those?" He said, "My dad built them."
Yeah.
And the guy said, "Well, gosh, could you build me something like that?" And I said, "Well, I probably could." And there was a local guy who did this kind of stuff. Actually, it was the boss from the old golf course, the guy who used to own the golf course I was a head pro at. He had a store that he was still building clubs. And I went in to see him one day to find out some better suppliers, better places. He said, "Well, I'll be glad to supply you with whatever you need." And I said, "Well, heck, you want to just build the clubs to my specs?" He said, "Yeah." And I forgot at the time, but I think he was selling whatever club it was for $60, let's say.
Yeah.
And I built this guy these clubs, and I gave him the price, and he said, "Is that all?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, here's an extra $100, because I was expecting to pay a lot more." Well, as a businessman, that kind of got my attention.
Yeah. I could read that as you were talking about it. Yeah.
And I went back and I told Dave, I said, I got that set of clubs I built for that guy, and I said I added like $50 to what you charged me, because he gave me like a professional discount anyway.
Yeah.
And so my price was pretty close to his. And I said, the guy gave me a $100 tip. He said, "Well, when you got PRO after your name, you can charge more than I can." And we laughed about it. But the guy played with the clubs, and then another guy came to me and said, "Hey, Joe told me you made him a set of clubs. Can you make me a set?" And one thing led to another, and pretty soon I had parked the cars out in the driveway and taken over our garage. And at some point, my wife told me, "You're going to have to get out of my garage."
I could see Linda doing that, yeah.
We had a printing business, and we had a pretty good-sized storage area that really had more junk in it than it had storage in it. And we rearranged that, got rid of the junk, sold off some surplus equipment, and put me a workshop in the printing shop. And one door, you can get printing, you can get golf clubs. You go left for one, right for the other. So I set up a little shop there, and then one thing led to another. Then I started doing some research and learned about launch monitors, and found about Tom Wishon and some other brands that were, a little step up here, and some exclusive brands. Started bringing that stuff in, and actually at one time in the lobby of our printing business, I had a collapsible net and a somewhat of a launch monitor that I would set up when I had a fitting.
Yeah.
And when people came into the print shop, we had to pause and let them walk through between the tee and the net to get to the service counter. And I did that for maybe about a year. And our printing business was located in a little strip shopping center. and one of the buildings on the far end came open, and my wife said, "You know that other building's open down there?" And I took the hit, and I rented that building and moved all my golf stuff down there. And that way I was able to put up a net, and I think I started with a Golf Achiever down there, and I was off and running.
Yeah, the rest is history, huh?
Yeah. The rest, as they say, is history. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Roy, everybody's story is a little different, so it's kind of fun to hear that. Talk about a little bit, please, your basic philosophy related to club fitting, because I know a few things about that, but what especially you're getting people to try to accomplish when you do a fitting with them.
Well, do you want the whole history or just where I've evolved to?
Go for it.
I'll just give you a little preface. When I first started fitting, I read all the books, Tom Michon's books, Ralph Maltby's books, Jeff Jackson, was it Jeff Sheets? Whoever, Stubbs and Cochran,
right.
That.
Yeah.
All the books that you need to read. I went on all the websites I could find that talked about custom fitting. I was somewhat familiar with it because even way back in the 60s when I was playing, one of the guys I played a lot of golf with had Kenneth Smith clubs, and those were mail order custom fit. I don't know if you know of them or not.
A little bit.
But I think Kenneth Smith is the guy that invented the swing weight scale as we know it today.
Yeah.
There was two versions of a swing weight scale. He invented the newer one, I guess.
Yeah.
But I had some knowledge from being a golf pro, what a swing was and this, that, and the other. But over time, as I started fitting people with the Golf Achiever allowed me to look at swing path and face angle. And I kind of knew that if a guy was real strong, he needed a heavier club. If we had a lady, she needed a lighter club. If a guy was taller, he needed a longer club. If a guy was shorter, he needed a shorter club. The common sense things I already knew.
Yeah.
But as I built a test set with connectors and started getting more shafts, more heads, I started noticing a trend that most people, when I first started, let me explain, my fitting set, I had demo clubs. And as you know, as a club fitter, if you got a heavier shaft, the swing weight goes up. You got a lighter shaft, the swing weight goes down. And the relationship to where the weight is in the club changes, because if you got a 75-gram shaft with a, say, a 250-gram head versus a 130-gram shaft with a 250-gram head, one club's heavier, the other one's lighter, and the center of gravity on that club, or the balance point on that club, moves up and down because you got a higher concentration of weight in the head with a lighter shaft than you do. The weight is spread out more with the heavier shaft. And at some point I began to notice, and I didn't know if it was a causation or an association, but when I would give a guy the graphite shaft, he would have more of a tendency to leave the face open. If I gave him a steel shaft, he'd have more of a tendency to close the face if he could handle the shaft. And from adding lead tape to the hosel, testing people, at that time I wasn't really sure why I was doing it, but I began to notice that if I added more tape, the face opened more. And if I could figure out a way to lighten the club, the face closed more. And eventually I said, here's something. If you got a heavy head, you can't get the face closed. And I started learning about MOI.
Yeah.
I found out that MOI, is what sets things in motion, the amount of energy needed to move an object, more or less. Simple explanation. But it occurred to me that maybe adding that weight and making a higher or heavier MOI, it took more strength and energy to close the face, and if you had a lower MOI, it didn't take as much. So I started experimenting with ladies and giving them very light heads, and with great big gorilla football player types, giving them real heavy heads. And over time, I found out that you could also influence that by changing the total weight by going from a 75-pound graphite shaft or gram to a 130-gram steel shaft. And while I was playing around with that head being open or closed, I also noticed that when I gave a guy a heavier club, they had a tendency to swing more inside out. And if I gave a guy that light graphite shaft, they had a tendency to swing more outside in. And as I began to notice this, I actually started doing experiments with people. And I would start with a 75 gram, then I go to a 95 gram, then a 115 gram, then a 130 gram shaft. And I would look, and I noticed a trend that as I gave them heavier shafts, their swing moved more inside. Like anything else in fitting, this isn't true 100% of the time, but if it's, I go with the what is it, Pietro's law, the 80-20 rule.
Yeah, right.
I figure 80% of the time this is probably going to work. 20% of the time, maybe not so much. And the opposite was true when I went from heavier shafts to lighter shafts. Their swing path moved from more inside to more outside. And eventually, I figured out that I could put the right weight of shaft and weight the head properly, and I could get a guy swinging his swing path right down the target line and the face pointed right at the target very consistently. And when I did that, the guy hit straight shots. And not being a mathematician or a physicist or anything like that, I was still smart enough to know that the club was designed, say, with 5-iron with 26 degrees, that if everything was the way it was supposed to be at impact, the 26 degrees would launch the ball at a certain angle and would achieve optimal distance, optimal flight path. All the things were optimized when that club functioned as it was designed to function, better than if your face was closed or if your face was open. For example, open face, you're going to hit a bit of a fade. Closed face, you're going to hit a little of a draw. And I figured out, well, if we get that face perfectly square, he's going to get the full effect of the 26 degrees. He's going to get the right launch angle. He's going to make maximum flight time, maximum distance, and the club's going to work exactly the way the designer designed it. And if we get the swing path directly down the target line and the face square with it, we're going to hit straight shots exactly the way the club's supposed to be used. So I started fitting people, trying to get them as close to down the target line with a swing path with a face square as I possibly could by balancing these weight elements.
Yeah.
Of course, I also played with length, and the other important fitting factors you're aware of.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that I know you've done too, I'm going to prompt you because you've talked about it. Sometimes you will even work with people. Say if they do that and they hit it a little left, well, aim a little right, or if they're hitting a little right, and still hitting it straight. It's a good idea. It's nothing wrong with aiming a little different to make the ball go where you want it, right?
Well, yeah, and that goes back to, my influences when I was growing up, learning how to play the game. I worked at the Columbus Country Club where Fred Haskins had been the golf pro years before I came there.
Yeah.
And Fred Haskins is the guy that the Haskins Trophy is named for the Collegiate Golfer of the Year. And his assistant, who used to build clubs, and Mr. Haskins had his own club designs, and he built clubs. This is back in the hickory shaft era. But his assistant was still there as the caddy master. He ran the caddies and the carts, and all that stuff. And I got to know him real well, and I don't know if you know what it's like to be an assistant golf pro, especially a very new one. The only time you get to play golf is if you come in before the golf shop opens.
Yeah.
And you play before you go to work. And I used to go out with Howard Pitch, the caddy master, and Howard and I would go out when the sun came up and sweep the dew. And we had a few members that would join us from time to time. And while I was there as an assistant pro, Mr. Haskins retired as a golf pro and took over the job as the maintenance superintendent at the Columbus Country Club. And sometimes Howard and I would go by the maintenance shed and chit-chat with Mr. Haskins, and, he would give me golf tips and tell me about my swing and swing theory and club theory, And I got a lot of this early on, but I really didn't know what I was getting at the time. I just knew he was Mr. Haskins, the old pro that used to be there that retired. There was no Haskins Trophy back then. That was in the mid-'60s.
Yeah.
And so I started there, and that was my first influence. And when I went to PGA school in '68, I think it was, the pro that was teaching us how to teach the golf swing was Bob Toski. And I always figured when school I would sit in the front row, I would learn more. Well, me and two guys from Atlanta that were there with me were all sitting right in the front row, and Toski looked down and he saw me. I was kind of small, about his size, and a guy named Teddy Hayes, who was a terrific player, who was a little bit bigger, and he says, "You two, come up here. I need you as guinea pigs." And Teddy and I were there the entire school. Every time we would get to the teaching section, we would go up on stage and we would be his demonstrators. And when I swung, he said, "Man, I got a lot of work cut out for me here to fix this." When Teddy swung, he said, "I need to give you a cab fare to the airport, and you grab your clubs and head for the tour." So he had a model swing and me. But through the whole school, Toski worked with me and showed me how to correct my swing. And when I went to PGA school, I was a guy that could shoot 65 sometimes, and the next day I would shoot 75. And when I got back from the school and worked on the things he gave me, I was a guy that shoot 65 most of the time, and when I had a bad day, I shot 68. So I would say he was very effective. My game changed dramatically. But somewhere along the way, between them and other good players, something struck me as saying, somebody asked some pro that I don't remember who it was. It could have been Toski, it could have been Mr. Haskins, it could have been Hugh Royer, it could have been a lot of people. But somebody asked him one time, says, if everything I hit goes 20 feet to the left of the pin, what can I do to get the ball on line? And they said, aim 20 feet to the right.
Duh, right?
And that kind of stuck with me. It was a flippant remark, being a smart aleck, but it stuck. It's just pure common sense. And one of the things that I found when I was fitting is I would work with people trying to get their stance perfectly square and their left foot at 22 degrees and their back foot at 90 degrees, and all this stuff and all the proper swing techniques, and try to fit their clubs. And no matter what I did, everything they hit went 20 feet to the left. And one day I woke up and I said, try aiming 20 feet to the right. And the guy aimed 20 feet to the right, and everything he hit was right at the pin. And he said, well, can I play that way? Do I have to fix my swing? And I said, well, if you aim 20 feet to the right and you hit everything you hit and it goes in the hole, do you want to just do that or work on your swing? The guy laughed. He said, are you kidding me? And an idea was born.
Yeah. Well, you've talked about that a lot. Well, Roy, talk about some of the things about custom fitting that you think golfers don't understand or appreciate enough.
Oh, wow. I think the battery on my phone will die, Tony.
Yeah,
I don't know.
well, pick a couple. Sorry about that. But
well, I think a lot of... Are you talking about golfers, fitters, or both?
Golfers.
Golfers. I think golfers tend to think there's some magic technology because the manufacturers that you see advertising on TV, every year they come out with a new club design that's designed to hit the ball 10 yards further than the club they had last year. Yeah. Well, this is nothing new. In the 60s when I learned to play golf, they had the same thing. And one day I sit down and figured out, okay, if I got the newest club every year from 1965 until today, I would be hitting my tee shots approximately 750 yards. or something ridiculous like that. Right. And it, again, common sense prevails that obviously the marketing that they're doing is a lot of fertilizer, you might say, because if every year they got some new technology that hits the ball 10 yards further, we would be hitting the ball way further than we're hitting it today. And I started analyzing what is the technology. technology is we have a maximum coefficient of restitution on the face that we can't exceed. We have a golf ball that is limited physically. We have metals that are limited physically. So physically, there are only so many things we can do to a golf club, and all of that has pretty much been done. We might tinker around the edges, but we're not going to get any massive technological advancements that I know of unless they change the rules of golf. And I think a lot of golfers think, I'll just go out and buy the latest technology and I'll play great. And they read an article in Golf or Golf Digest, or they see an ad on TV that says, if you got a lighter club, you automatically hit it farther.
Yeah.
If you got a longer club, you automatically hit it farther. Well, that's not always true. As I mentioned before, is the 80-20 rule. 80% of this stuff applies all the time. 20% of it doesn't apply at all. To start with the lighter club, you can swing it faster so that you hit the ball farther. I've had people that come in. I had a guy, as you know, I'm a big Alabama fan, but I'm only about 30 miles from Auburn. So I have a lot of people that are friends that are Auburn fans. And I had a guy come in one day, and he had played linebacker at Auburn. And his first 2 years, he didn't have a scholarship. He had to work his way to pay for school. And he worked his way through school as a brick mason. And he had huge forearms, very strong hands, and, you know, he could crush you with a hand. And, of course, you know, linebackers are not small people, and they're not skinny people. They're muscular guys. This guy was as strong as an ox. And he came in with a driver that had a 45-gram shaft in it. And I said, what seems to be your problem? As he got ready to hit on the launch monitor, he said, well, everything I hit goes low and left. And back to my theory about weight and all that stuff that we discussed.
Yeah.
I said, okay, go ahead and hit a few. Well, sure enough, everything he hit about 25 degrees to the left, and that's where it started. Then it started turning over, and it did a duck hook into the woods. And I thought, okay, well, the first thing, he's got a 45-gram shaft, so he needs a heavier shaft. He's way too strong. He's overpowering that shaft. And as I talked to him, he said, yeah, and I really don't feel like I can control this, and I have to slow my swing down because it's too dad-blame light. I said, well, why have you got it? He said, well, my pro told me if the lighter the club I got, the farther I'd hit it. Well, at the time when he came in swinging that club, his average carry distance was 279 yards, I believe it was. It was just shy of 280 yards. I remember that. And I said, okay, let's try this. So I went over, and the first thing I wanted to do was go as totally opposite of what he had in his hands. So the first thing I did was I picked up a Rifle 7.0 steel shaft that weighs 130 grams, put it on a good head for him, you know, that I figured would work. And immediately he is hitting a shot that starts about 5 degrees to the right of the pin and fades about 10 feet. And he's carrying it at 330. Now, here's a case of you put a guy in a shaft that's, you're the PhD here, you got 45 up to 130. What do you got?
You mean in terms of change?
What, 85 grams heavier?
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
I mean, that's a significant increase.
Yeah, right.
So what happened to the rule that if you have a lighter club, you hit it further?
Well, it wasn't right.
This guy's got a club that's off, bang, right out of the gate, it's 85 grams heavier. Well, this guy went nuts. He said, I can't believe it. I picked up 50 yards, and I'm hitting it straight as a string almost. I said, no, you're hitting it just a little right and with a little fade. He said, I'll take it.
Yeah, right. 50 yards and no big duck hooks, right? Right.
Yeah, no more duck hooks. He's hitting the ball. I think he was launching it 15, 16 degrees, had about a 30, 35 degree descent angle, and where he's going to get roll. So, you know, he was happy as he could be, and it took me 10 minutes to fit him because the first thing I tried worked. Yeah. Of course, we did go back and we tried some different heads, you know, and some different shafts and so forth. We ended up with that Rifle 7.0, and I think we came up with another head that got him another, 4 or 5 yards that he liked better and it felt better. But, there again, the opposite of what everybody's telling you is true worked for this guy. And so I think the big thing is don't make assumptions based on advertising, thinking that if you follow what the advertisers tell you to do, you're going to improve your golf game. Go to a good qualified fitter that knows what you and I know. Let them test you to find out if these quote-unquote theories work on you or the opposite works on you.
That's fabulous. And we were going to talk about success stories. I'm not sure you can beat that success story, Roy, in terms of anything else you can talk about. If you have another one.
The only thing I could add to it is over the 12 or 13 years that I did this before I closed my shop, I had a great many people that had similar stories. Yeah. It's not a random incident. And I've had guys add, what was it? Almost 40 yards to a 5-iron shot. I think I've posted several examples of that over the years on our mailing list when I sent out the, the Flight Scope data pages.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Several instances where guys picked up 30 to 40 yards on their 5-iron.
So,
I mean, how well you can be fit doesn't depend on your ability, doesn't depend on your age, doesn't depend on anything more than how badly you're fit with the clubs you got in your bag now.
I'm not sure I've ever heard anybody say it quite that way. So,
I mean, I've had I had a guy come in. He used to be the tournament director for the Southern Open when they played it here in Columbus. And he had heard about me through other people success stories. He was a member of Green Island Country Club where they played the Southern Open for years. And he came in, he said, Roy, I've heard a lot about you from a lot of people I respect, and they say you work miracles. And I said, well, I don't know about that, but I've helped some folks. And he came in, and I was able to get him a driver that got him about 20, 25 yards more. But when we started working on his irons, I got him about 3 or 4 yards more. He wasn't particularly more consistent. He wasn't particularly more accurate. And he says, well, what do you recommend? I said, well, I'd say, how many sets of clubs have you had in the last 10 or 15 years? He said, I've been buying 2 or 3 sets of clubs a year, trying to find the right set. And I got these about 3 years ago. And they work for me, and I don't know if I need to change or not. Yeah. I said, well, just between me and you, I don't think I would spend $1,500 to get 3 more yards on my 5-iron.
Yeah.
He said, well, I think I agree with you, and I was hoping you'd say that. And, there was no need in him changing because it's just, if you as a businessman, ROI is important, and that means return on investment.
Yeah.
And for 3 yards on a 5-iron, what are you talking about, 9 feet?
Yeah.
I think I can live with what I got for $1,500. And, a lot of things like that. He had bought so many sets of clubs on his own, he spent a small fortune swapping clubs until he found a set that really worked well for him. And his Titleist irons with 74-gram graphite shafts were very, very similar to the club that I fit him to.
Yeah.
I just tweaked it a little bit. And he said, well, can you tweak mine? I said, yeah. Let's leave them in here, and I'll kind of... And I pulled them and, flowed the shafts, checked all the swing weights and MOIs, put them back together and just tweaked them a little bit and gave them back to him. He said they did hit better, but, not a lot.
But, now he has the data to back it up, though.
Yeah.
Rather than just sort of assuming, right?
But there was a case that through all the drivers he bought, he couldn't find one that worked. But he found a set of irons that worked self-fitting. But my gosh, 2 or 3 sets of irons for 10 or 15 years? How much money is that?
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, Roy, we've hit about 30 minutes. How about that? Time flies, huh? Any final words you want to add at the end here?
In summary, I guess what I'd say is don't fit yourself according to what you hear from advertising. Go to someone who knows what they're talking about. Let them fit you and tell you what they need, and you'll come out a whole lot better and save a lot of money.
Save a lot of money and play a lot better, too.
Well, you're going to play better. If you go to an AGCP fitter, you're going to lower your scores and you're going to play better golf. That's for sure, because the things that we do, the things that we know about, are going to almost ensure if you get somebody that's certified and qualified and from 7 and up, they know what they're doing and they've got enough experience to make sure you play better golf.
Well, thanks for this today, Roy. It was worth the wait to get to talk with you, and I really enjoyed hearing the things you talked about today. I'm going to put some links to the AGCP locator and also to McNick's Golf in the show notes. But thanks again for doing this today. Appreciate it.
Great, Tony. Thanks.
Taking your game to new heights. www.gameimprovementgolf.com.
Well, thanks, Roy, for that great interview and for providing your great perspective on how Real Custom Club Fitting helps golfers to play their best golf. I've included links to Roy's McNick's Golf website and also to the AGCP Custom Club Fitter locator site in the show notes. Well, that's it for today. In 2 weeks, I'll get to talk and you'll get to listen to a new friend, Rob Gibb, who's the Director of Instruction at the North Jersey Country Club. Rob recently became one of, I believe, 4 Level 3 certified Sam Putt Lab instructors in the world, and in March he'll become the U.S. Sam Putt Lab sales rep when my friend Glenn Coombe retires. We'll talk putting improvement. See you in 2 weeks.
Game Improvement Golf, your source of information and inspiration to become an exceptional golfer now. www.gameimprovementgolf.com.